Well, greetings, my friends and fellow travelers and journeyers through this thing that we call life. Welcome to Life Mastery TV, your source for inspiration, empowerment, and fulfillment. My name is David McLeod, and I am your Life Mastery Coach. Forgiveness is a magical and mystical concept and a mystical force that a lot of people don't really understand. You know, there's a lot of myths and misconceptions about forgiveness. We have a collective mistaken idea about what forgiveness is and how it is meant to be used. We think it is a gift that we offer to another person, and as if that is somehow going to make that person better, whereas in fact it really has a completely different purpose altogether. And we're going to discuss some of those ideas, some of the myths and misconceptions, and we're going to clarify a whole bunch of stuff. And to help me with this rather large task, I've invited a beautiful author, teacher, workshop leader who has learned about forgiveness the hard way.
Yes.
She has a powerful and clear mission to bring a forgiveness tool to a cynical world that is craving a way to let go of pain and anger. And armed with the motto that forgiveness is the link between love and healing, she believes that when we practice forgiveness, we make room in our hearts for more love and kindness. And that's why we call this episode Spreading the Forgiveness Love. So please join me in welcoming Reverend Misty Tyme to our show today.
Hey, everyone.
Welcome, Misty, and thank you so much for joining me. And
thank you for also understanding that forgiveness does have myths and misconceptions. And we need to clear those up.
Yeah, it does. And, you know, I've had my own experience going through life and holding on to pain and resentment and anger and letting it grow to a point where it became toxic.
Yes.
And it wasn't until I actually learned about forgiveness that stuff all just kind of left.
Where did you learn that? Where did you learn about forgiveness?
Well, I learned it mostly through personal experience, actually. I mean, there were people who told me about forgiveness, but I just still didn't really understand what it meant.
It's kind of a mythical out there thing.
Right.
Yeah.
I had it taught to me through religious teachings and that sort of thing. And I said, it's a great idea. It's wonderful and so forth. And I couldn't get myself there. It was a long and involved process for me, but mostly it was like on the job training. That's really what it came to be.
And that's actually, I was in your space, and I kind of thought I was already pretty shiny because I had been to seminary and ordained in a church where Martin Luther King spoke forgiveness. I couldn't get shinier. Yeah. And then I realized when this deep unforgiveness came up, and unforgiveness, by the way, is that anger, pain, and my very favorite, smoldering resentment that comes over time in relationships or situations. And there I was, stuck right in it. And I was like, wasn't I supposed to know what this is? And sure enough, I didn't. Yeah. I was still stuck in those myths and misconceptions. And I definitely want to share that with your audience.
So my understanding is that you had a pretty complex and difficult story that you went through.
Right.
It got you to this place of realizing you had to do something.
Right.
Can you share a little bit about that?
Sure. And I wrote it in the book because I thought it was so important that it doesn't matter what your story is. Oh, look,
I forgot to mention
he's
the book.
Right on it.
The book, The Forgiveness Solution by Misty Tyme. This is a great little book. You can pick it up on Amazon.
Amazon, through my publisher, all major bookstores.
And we'll talk about this a little bit later, but I want to make sure you know.
And that was not my plan. The book was not my plan. No. I'm a public speaker. I didn't. Writer scares me because I don't know where that darn comma is supposed to go. And then, but ultimately, through my own journey, I realized that I wasn't the only one that was stuck in this pain and anger and unforgiveness of past relationships or even a current relationship.
Right.
And so it started with I had that family. The family that good on the outside, not so good on the inside. Mm-hmm. And my parents were both alcoholics. My mom she was fun at a party, not necessarily funny as your mom. So that doesn't mean she was brilliant and smart, super talented. She was a professional singer. I compare her to Elizabeth Taylor quite often because she had 6 husbands. And and a martini on one hand and a man on the other.
Right.
And so her life was pretty tumultuous, and I blamed her for so much. And as she got older, she got dementia and Alzheimer's, and I ended up taking care of her until she died. And that was a big letting go process, because my mom stopped being angry, believe it or not, because you know why? You have to remember why you're angry to stay angry, and she forgot everything. Yeah. So she forgot the men that left her and all the life things that didn't happen for her and all that. And she truly was what we all try to do, live in the moment. And so that gave me some healing time, and that was great, but I didn't really realize what was happening until 6 months later, when my twin brother killed himself. And I'd already lost a sister to cancer and another brother to cancer. And I was an oncology clinician in oncology a long time ago. So I was pretty familiar with death and even grief. Like, you know, my adopted dad died of cancer also, and I was pretty familiar with grief. But I used to think if my twin brother passed away, I would be fine with it, because we were not close. And he turned into one of those men that we used to hide from. So he was an alcoholic. He was a rageaholic. He made horrible life decisions. And I kept him at an arm's length, because you know that whole boundary thing we all talk about? But really, it wasn't boundaries that I was doing with him. What I was doing was angrily pushing him away, because I was waiting for him to do a couple things. Apologize. Oh, and by the way, he should change. like he doesn't know. So, and I talk a lot about studies in my book, because I actually used to set up studies for large medical companies. And I think studies are super important, because they can kind of boil down some stuff. And there's an amazing institute, and I really recommend everybody looks it up. It's called the Fetzer Institute, and it's out of the Midwest. And they study stuff just like this. And they fund lots of stuff that we don't know about, including Oprah's, you know, documentaries and different stuff. But this is their number one goal. They are a nonprofit, and they study great stuff. And one of their studies is all about forgiveness. And actually, it's a survey of 1,000 people. And what's interesting, and it kind of goes right back to what I just said about my brother and really my whole family, which was I wanted them to change. And in the study, they asked these 1,000 people, is forgiveness a good idea? And guess what? We all kind of think, yeah, that's a good idea, that we should, quote, let it go, right? Disney sings about it and everything. But they asked what they needed to forgive. What do you need to forgive that person or that situation? And they said, well, I need an apology, and I need the person to change. And ultimately, what comes out of that is exactly where I was, which was I needed to be told or proven that I was right and they were wrong. Well, in my deep research after my brother died, and understand, like many of us, our mess becomes our message, right? I was researching to solve my pain, right? To fix this pain. I understood grief. I mean, I'm certified in grief recovery. Like, I understood grief, but there was another layer here. So since he passed away, my twin brother, who once was my best friend and hid with me in the closet, and we protected each other from that rage and those alcoholics and all that stuff, I had to give up the dream and hope of him changing. Right. And that's probably, if you think about anybody in your life that has hurt you, and whether it be an ex or a family member or an abuser, we want them to be accountable for their bad behavior. And we want them to change. Wouldn't that be lovely if they just magically, like a little magic wand, came in and said, yes, I'm wrong, and I will fix everything because you showed me the light. Well, it doesn't work that way. And I was really upset when I realized it wasn't, because I was like, hold it, but aren't I right? Wasn't I right? Well, you know what? I was. I wanted him to be healthier and happier and live a healthier life. And I wanted him to be able to come over for dinner. And I wanted to have a family reunion where there wasn't a police officer outside. So, you know, I wanted all that. And those were never bad things. Were those bad? No, of course not. But now I had to grieve the person that I wanted him to be and then also come to realization and grieve the person he actually was.
Right.
And to do that, I had to forgive him. And the way I did that was go through his story, like third party, like not as his twin sister, but as a person who saw him as an injured human. Because I know what he went through. I was there.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And he even went through worse abuse than I did. And so when I wrote down his story, I uncovered this broken person. And damn it, empathy just like snuck right in there. And when empathy snuck in, oh, my pain got better. And I all of a sudden felt like I wish I could hug him and help him feel love that he obviously struggled ever feeling. Right. And so the forgiveness algorithm came from that because I needed to understand the how.
Sure.
And that brings up myths and misconceptions. Which do you think is the biggest myth and misconception of forgiveness?
Well, before we go there.
Yeah.
Before we go there.
Oh, yeah, sure.
That was a lot of stuff.
I know.
To unpack.
Yeah.
A lot of stuff to unpack, and I just want to, focus on a couple of points. First, the need to have the other person change.
Yep.
I don't think that is an uncommon
totally
desire.
Human, by the way.
Right,
totally
right.
A human, normal thing.
Right.
Yeah.
I have a judgment about you that you're not showing up the way you should be showing up, and therefore you should change to fit my model of the world.
And I would even say that we believe somebody could be.
Correct.
So we're actually believing the best in them.
Yeah, that's possible too.
Yeah.
And it could just be a pure control thing. I just want you to conform to my beliefs.
Right. I talked about
so there's that part. And then the apology part, I think that's kind of related.
Yes.
Because the apology is what you're saying is, I want you to acknowledge that you did something wrong, that you were hurtful to me, that you caused me pain, and so forth and so on.
Yeah.
So these are two important things, things that I talk about all the time. And you said this wraps up into one little thing called, you're right. Mm-hmm. I want to be told I'm right.
And you probably are, by the way.
Of course. And that's sure. And that's another point. Yeah. I mean, we could have a whole conversation about you're right. That's a different issue. What I'd like to just kind of focus on here, though, is wanting the other person to change. There's nothing wrong with that. But waiting for them to change, that's where you're going to get yourself caught. Because every single person on this planet has his or her own vision about how his or her life should go.
Right, exactly.
And so you can make suggestions and you can offer support, but you can't tell them the right way to go.
Well, you think you can.
Well, I know, but you can't.
You can't.
You can. I mean, you certainly can tell them.
Right. And I talk about how to do that, actually.
Right.
How to express that need, that in a different way. So in a lot of my workshops, we actually practice that.
Sure. And so really it comes down to what I'm really saying to you is, if you would show up this way, it would give me this sense of such and such. Is there another way for me to get that without requiring you to change? That's really what we're getting down to here. And the same thing goes with the apology piece. Yeah. I personally, I don't put a lot of stock in apology. A lot of apologies are shallow and they're repeated over and over again. I'm much more interested, if somebody feels the need to apologize, I'm much more interested in accountability.
Well, that's also trust. And trust comes with time, and accountability comes with time, because we watch. Because we've always heard walk the walk, talk the talk. So a lot of people talk the talk and don't walk the walk, which means that they'll say all the right things, and then you're like, hold it, something doesn't compute. They're doing the opposite of. Right. So that's really a trust situation. A good apology can be super healing. But the issue is also, like with forgiveness, we've kind of twisted those up, because many times we apologize so that the other person will apologize to us, again, acknowledging our pain. Mm-hmm. Right. And how many times have you said, well, I said I was sorry, but they didn't?
Yeah, well, that's just my point. Saying I'm sorry isn't really an apology. No. All that's doing is saying, I'm sorry, I am sad, I am grieving. That's really all it is saying.
Yeah, I absolutely agree.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
And so, I mean, we can go down this road about apology and I have a long conversation about that. But I'd like to kind of stay back on the forgiveness piece.
Sure.
So now you asked, what is the greatest myth about forgiveness.
What is your idea of the greatest myth?
Well,
Yeah.
my belief about forgiveness is I always thought, before I learned the proper method of forgiveness, if you like, that my forgiving you was for you. That was the thing I was thinking in my head.
Right.
And of course, that's completely backwards. It is not
absolutely
true at all.
backwards. Yes, it is.
It's
Yeah.
really, forgiveness is only about me. When I forgive you for something, what I'm really doing is giving myself permission to let go of any pain or any attachment I have to a particular expectation or outcome or control or any of that stuff. What I'm doing is giving myself permission to just let that all go and then just allow you to be who you are.
To let you be you. You know, we've always said, just do you. Well, that is exactly what forgiveness is. And it's super hard to do when you see someone, them doing themselves and doing their own path. And if it's destructive, you want to save them.
That's right.
You want to, especially if you love them or have a relationship. If these are your children that are doing drugs and that kind of stuff, you want to, but they're over the age of 18 and you don't literally have control. So it's one of the hardest things to do because it actually does come from a good place.
Yeah,
Most of the time, people's control issues come from a place of wanting everybody to be okay. But we have this disbelief that we have that power. And last time I checked, I don't have a magic wand. Do you?
No,
and I don't have a crown or a fairy princess thing or nothing.
No magic pills, no red pill, blue pill thing.
None of it, right? So it's very difficult to get to that place. And so can I tell you a few of my myths and misconceptions that I run into all the time?
Sure.
Okay. So my very favorite one is that you're supposed to forgive and forget.
Oh my.
I know.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, last time I checked, elephants and people, we don't forget. And there's a good reason for that. Now, whatever your spiritual belief system is, you don't even need that to clear this up. But I always say that we were given this tool of not forgetting for a good reason, so that we keep ourselves safe, right? So if you're a mouse out in the wilderness and there's a lion and the mouse walks up to the lion and gets bit, guess what? Not only does that mouse learn, but all the rest of the mouses learn, and they don't do that. Now, us as humans, we keep walking right back into that lion's mouth and go, hold it, not this time. I believe in you. You're not going to hurt me this time because I love you this much. And so when we get bit, we're all like, they did it again.
Yeah, it's like the story of the man who had a snake, an injured snake. And it turns out the snake was poisonous, but he nursed the snake back to life, and then the snake bit him.
Right.
And he says to the snake, why did you do that? After all the love and the care and the attention I gave you. It's my nature.
Yes. Exactly. So we do this with our loved ones, our coworkers, sometimes even random strangers.
Oh, yeah.
So we go back into bad situations because we're expecting a different outcome. And, I was in sales for a million years. And I
really? You don't look a year over 9,000. Yeah, whatever.
So, but ultimately, in sales, you always have that. If you're doing the same thing and getting the same result, and you're expecting it to change, that's like insanity, right? Right. So my question to you, in your personal life, in your professional life, are you doing the same thing and expecting the same result from the same people who have clearly said, wasn't it Oprah or somebody on Oprah who said, people show you who they are, believe them? She's my spirit animal, just saying. So
you have a tattoo totem
this close to a tattoo. So, but my point is that we do need to believe people. Now, our problems where we run into it is that when they're our spouse and our loved ones and stuff, our expectations come into play here.
Correct.
So, myth and misconception about forgiveness is, first of all, that you're supposed to forgive and forget. That if you forgive them, that you approve of their behavior. Now, I get this the most when it comes to people who abuse substances. Like, if I forgive them, they're going to think it's that I agree with that they use and that they're alcoholics or whatever. Could not be further from the truth. Also, that it lets them off the hook somehow. Like, they don't have any justice available to them. If you forgive someone, if it's immoral, illegal, then and they need to be prosecuted, then you let the justice system handle that.
Yeah.
If it's they're irritating, rude, always show up even drunk or whatever, don't have them over for dinner.
Exactly.
Because they've showed you. So
Yeah.
now the burden of this pain is actually you causing your own pain.
Mm-hmm.
And that's super important, because then guess what? All of a sudden we do have control. Right? We have full control over our decisions that will affect our happiness. Right.
You know, this really is bringing up stuff for me about my own son, my youngest son, who has. Let me just say that when he was born and up until the time he was around 25, to me he was just a shining light, a young little Buddha, like Mr. Enlightenment, you know, and he was on a beautiful path, I thought. But then something shifted. Something shifted in his mind, in his life, in the relationships that he had, that caused him to start doing some rather dark and unpleasant things. And this had a negative effect on a lot of people in our life. Now, he's my son. I love him forever and ever, no matter what. And I have to draw a line about how far I'm willing to accept his behavior. So I can forgive him for taking the choices that he takes, because he's an adult and he has his own path to choose. And at the same time, I can choose to stay back. I've expressed to him what I would like to see. I've expressed to him that the kind of behavior that he's doing is not really conducive to good, positive relationships. And if he wants to improve them, then he's got to make changes. If he doesn't want to make changes, that's fine. That's his choice. I forgive him. I let him go. And I have no more expectation.
Right. So expectations is probably the number one thing I talk about. So I definitely want to get to that. And when it comes to quote the boundaries, I know it's a word that came up since the 90s, probably on Oprah again, but there's a reason that came up. It's because people were looking for a tool to be able to say, you stay there and I'm going to stay here, right? I always say love them, but with a 10-foot pole, right? You can pray for them. You can love them. You can wish them the best. You can send a birthday card, whatever it is that you're comfortable with. But if they are unsafe, unhealthy, and cause drama, then love them with a 10-foot pole.
Exactly.
Keep them over there.
Yep.
Yeah. So I totally agree with that. And when it's our children, it is so hard, because we also go internal and think, what did I do? Also, by the way, sometimes that's a very valid thing to do, because FYI, I know I'm not the perfect parent.
Well, I'd like to meet the perfect parent.
Yeah, I know. I talk about that a lot in my How to Forgive Your Family class, right? So there's not perfect parents, there's not perfect people, and we want them to be a certain way. We have expectations. When they're born, we're thinking doctor, lawyer. By the time they're high schoolers, we're thinking law-abiding citizen. Like we kind of like, our idea changes. You know, they're not the cute little 4-year-old that told us how amazing we are anymore. They're like, the last person I want to be is you. And then you're like, what? And it's so painful and so hard. And then they run into things that are unhealthy, and we can see it because we've already been through our stuff. It's also a different generation. There's a lot more, quote, unhealthy than when our parents were kids or we were kids. I mean, there's some dangerous stuff out there. The drugs nowadays are serious. And so, you know, you see that. And so I get a lot of questions about, well, how can I help? And I said, well, you can help as much as they will let you. And if they don't take it, you need to learn. Otherwise, you're that silly mouse walking right back into it again.
Well, before you move on, this is moving pretty fast, so I'm trying to slow things down just a little. You said something that I think is really important, and that is when we see our children or our loved ones behaving in ways that we know is very different from who we believe they really are. That's when we begin to question ourselves. And now I want to bring up a very important point. At this time, if that happens, then self-forgiveness has to come up.
That's a big one. So I'm super honest about my life. I'm not my mother. I was not married 6 times, but I am been married 3 times. And I'm lucky, 3rd time was definitely a charm for me. But I came from such a rough family life that I ran from it to the first person. So I'm super young. By the way, there's some amazing statistics. I like to be part of the herd sometimes, so it makes me feel not so so bad about myself, which is that if you get married young, you divorce within usually 7 to 11 years. The average marriage lasts less than 8 years, right after that 7-year itch. You have kids and you put them through divorce. Well, I didn't want to ever do that to my children. And sure enough, I did it. Not once, but twice. And the self-forgiveness that came that I had to work through myself was acknowledging why I made those decisions, growing and maturing, lots of therapy. And I can give your audience just 2 things to ask themselves to help them with self-forgiveness.
Go right ahead.
Okay. First of all, whatever it is that you're thinking that you messed up on, like big, and you hurt people that you love, or you upset your life path and you're now playing catch up. So this is what I want you to ask yourself. First of all, would you ever do it again knowing what you know now? I usually get like a giant, oh, heck no. No, I would never. Oh, my goodness. Oh, I've learned so much. And I'm like, okay, great. Now, what have you learned? Ask yourself what you have learned, right? So you can't change your yesterday. You can't go back in a magic machine and time travel. So you have to learn from your experience. You have to do the work and forgive yourself, because 1, you wouldn't repeat it, right? And 2, you've learned so much from it that you have grown from. That's how you forgive yourself.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
2
that's
questions.
Really good. Yeah. Very powerful questions. I like that. Yeah, and self-forgiveness, I found personally, self-forgiveness is much more difficult than other forgiveness.
Yeah.
And yet, ironically, what I found interesting is the moment I was able to forgive myself, then suddenly forgiving others became even easier.
Right. I would totally agree with you with that. And then also you talked about apologies earlier. I think it's super important when you are trying to forgive yourself. It's about ownership for your own stuff.
Exactly.
Right? For some reason, we have this idea that we're not supposed to tell someone, whether it be our children, especially our children, because we're supposed to be the parent who doesn't do things wrong, even if we have put them through divorces or drama or painful situations. It is about owning your stuff. A good apology contains an amends and owning your own stuff. So I have, when my children were of a proper age, to sit down and have that discussion with them. And it never puts a but in it, by the way. An apology never has a but in it. So you don't say, I made these choices, but I was sad, I was this, I was that, because that makes it an excuse, that moment. So you say things like, a good apology contains I'm super sorry. Like, what I did was wrong and I know it hurt you. And it set you on a course that wasn't supposed to be the plan. And I truly apologize. And I'm going to do this, 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 and this. Now, lots of times if we say money, right, we owe somebody money and we didn't pay them back in an appropriate time or do what we said, you say, I'm going to pay you back and this is how I'm going to do it, right? Okay. So if it's an emotional payback, you have to say something like, if I talked about you behind your back and I put you through stuff, this is what I'm doing so that I will never do that again. Now, they don't have to forgive you or accept your apology at that time. You know what they're going to do? They're going to watch you because they want to see if you're walk the walk and talk the talk. Now hook up, because before it didn't. And I guarantee you, in time, whatever that time is for that person, all of a sudden your relationship will truly change. And if it's your children, they will actually learn from you.
Exactly. See, what you're talking about now is integrity.
Yeah.
Integrity is a state of being in which your thoughts, words, actions, and emotions are all aligned in the same direction.
And I would say that also takes some maturity, because lots of times we react from our own painful situation, right? And so it takes a pretty mature person to be able to look at that, kind of like a third party out there view. Kind of, that's why we go to therapy, by the way, because they're like the referee for our life. They can see stuff without being emotionally connected. So integrity also grows in your own self.
Sorry about that. That's my dog scratching himself right now.
Adorable, by the way. A really super adorable. And sometimes you just got to scratch yourself. Like, seriously.
Well, anyway, but what I'm getting at, though, is the integrity piece is the piece that allows, if I am a person who values integrity,
right,
and I see that any one of those 4 things is out of alignment, then I can say to myself, I'm not exactly in integrity right now. What is out of alignment? And that is when I can do a little bit of introspection and discover ways in which that I might be creating a negative impact in your life. And that's when I can take accountability. I have to own how my thoughts, words, actions, and emotions were out of alignment, and what I plan to do to bring them back in alignment. That's really what an apology is.
It is. And also when you take accountability, it's an amazing tool, because people are afraid of taking accountability many times. And because they have this like fear that if I own it, then people are going to look at me badly. Well, I have a big surprise for you. It's the opposite.
Yeah, right.
So when my kids were little, I used to tell them, so if you don't own your lie, mistake, whatever, I guarantee you there'll be 15 people ready to get on a bus and run you over. They want to show you what you're not acknowledging. So we see this a lot in politics. We see it in work relationships, that kind of stuff. But also, if you own your stuff, there'll be 15 people ready to pull you out from under the bus, because they're going to cheer you on. And again, we see this in society. Right. We see celebrities make big, horrible stuff, and then they apologize and they take accountability. Now, do we trust them? Not usually. We kind of side-eye. We're kind of like, well, we'll wait and see. We'll look and see if they live up to what they just said. And that's the big test. So both your family, your friends, your coworkers, all of that, if you own your stuff, they're all like, oh, thank you. Like, we believe in you. We understand. We're so sorry that we hurt your feelings too. And then there's all this back and forth stuff. But then if you do it again, they're going to like, oh, no, they didn't mean it in the first place. And then they'll bring their friends on the bus to run you over. So there is that integrity piece. Absolutely. Yeah. I agree with you. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I just see that as a beacon that lets me know whether or not I'm following the path that I claimed I wanted to follow.
Right.
That's how I do it. And I encourage the people that I work with to learn about integrity at a very deep level, because it's a powerful, powerful tool. And when I am in integrity, it's much easier for me then to connect in with how I can be forgiving to somebody else who may not be in integrity.
Right, exactly. Yeah, because you can almost see it. Like, you can see the chaos. And you're like, oh, I actually feel sorry for them.
Right.
Like I said with my brother, empathy snuck right in.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, I saw his chaos in a different way.
Right. In
a way that he wasn't trying to hurt me. He wasn't trying to be a horrible human to me. He was running his own patterns, his own pain, his own stuff. And I truly just wanted to hug him. Mm-hmm. So, that's where my forgiveness really started. And I understood that. Then I had to own my own stuff, like we talked about, because I talked behind his back. I told everybody, nobody actually, if we were new friends, one wouldn't even tell you I had a twin brother, because I was so embarrassed about him. And then if it came up, and you found out, I would then list off, well, he beat his wife, he did this, he did that, he did that. Why would I do that? Why do you think I would do that?
Because you're trying to enlist support of all the people that you tell, so that they also will hold this same anger, and that's part of what that's a shadow behavior that we do.
Absolutely. And also, if they are doing this to me, oh, what am I? I'm right. Mm-hmm. And he's wrong.
Plus, you get to be a victim, and he gets to be the perpetrator.
Right, exactly. So it kind of, quote, let me off the hook for my bad behavior, which was, if we were in a same place at the same time, I would literally turn my back. I wouldn't talk to him.
Oh, boy.
Oh, yeah. Like, I look like a nice mild-mannered
reporter.
Yeah, regular mom, and all that kind of stuff. But guess what? I had the same abilities to be rude and hateful. Sure. Especially to the ones we love. I'm far much nicer to perfect strangers. So anyway, I would do that because I was still trying to prove to him, I needed him to see how much he had hurt me.
Yeah.
And
he didn't want to see it.
No, he didn't want to see it. And the other thing is, he really, really did want to have a relationship with me. Now, it was like, again, remember what I said earlier, if they're unhealthy and difficult and all that, and he was an alcoholic, he wasn't safe to be around me and my family.
Mm-hmm.
But I could have been kinder. I could have sent him a birthday card. It's our birthday. It's like I can't forget it. It's not like I don't know when our birthday is, right? But I didn't send. That's okay. So I didn't send him birthday cards because you know why? If I didn't send him a birthday card, he would have to think about me, wouldn't he?
Mm.
Yeah, he'd have to think I didn't get it.
So it was a really controlling kind of
so
behavior.
back to all the stuff we've been talking about, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when I wrote his story, and I have you guys do that in the book, I actually give you space for it, or I tell you how to do it, and I talk about it like being in
this book right here. This book, the forgiveness.
So the reason I do that, and I give you some instructions because I don't have you go into the emotion of your emotion. So when he did this, it hurt me. I don't have you do that. I have you write their story from what you know or assume to know, right? So you can see, it's almost like reading a book all of a sudden, and it's their book. Mm-hmm. And you're like, I know my brother was sexually abused. Mm-hmm. I know my brother was beaten. I know my brother was picked on at school and all these things, right? And it didn't have anything to do with me. I didn't say he did this and this is what hurt me. That's not the story I want you to write. I want you to write their story as much as you know about it. And sometimes you have to do some research with friends or family. Or if it's somebody else like an uncle or whatever, try to find out the information so that you can see them and their story. And when you look at their story, I have very rarely ever had anyone go, oh, their pain, right? So I will tell you though, there's no such thing as a jerk pill. So you can write somebody's story and you can still say, yeah, they're still a jerk. And, and you're like, you're not going to be able to fix that. There are some people that you can't even understand why they act that way. They have the perfect family. They're financially secure. They have a very nice spouse, all these things. And you're like, why is my coworker such a jerk? You might never know. And so sometimes
first of all, I want to draw a line on that because anytime I believe that somebody else is a jerk, then there's a part of me that I'm not willing to look at. There's an aspect of myself that I am labeling as jerk, and I'm projecting it out onto that other person.
This is good. This is good because I kind of don't exactly agree with that.
Okay.
So
because I don't believe there's any such thing as a jerk.
Okay. Is there a person who makes bad decisions that hurt others?
I think that there are people I think everybody makes bad decisions, and I think everybody does things that other people react to as if it were painful for them. Right.
But I would also say in our society, there is a level of what is acceptable in regards to how we handle behavior.
Okay, I agree with that too.
So if somebody is always rude, right? If somebody, it doesn't matter, and it's not to you personally.
But who gets to decide what rude is? That's my question.
So if somebody, if you know that a person hits their wife, we can probably agree that is not healthy behavior.
Probably, right. I agree.
Now, you know enough about their background to know that they don't have an alcohol and drug problem. They grew up in a nice home. They had a spiritual upbringing, all these things. You almost can't answer the why.
That may be true too.
Right.
However, I do know this. Anytime one person strikes out at another person, the first person is experiencing some kind of pain.
Exactly.
We don't know what that pain is.
Right.
And so that's why I am sure sometimes I will react and say, what a jerk or what an asshole or something like that. That's what will happen in my ego mind.
Right.
But when I get down into my heart, I realize, this guy's got some pain that he's trying to deal with. He doesn't know how to do it.
And so what I'm saying is, and I kind of think we are kind of saying the thing, we're coming from a different place, is that we all run into those people. And lots of times it's at work, actually, because we don't know them well enough to really get the whole picture. But the fact is, if we were to write their story, there's a lot of blanks in there that we don't know. So you have to kind of say, I can't figure out how to have empathy for this person. I just really can't, because as humans, we want to know why. Why helps us heal. Why we act the way we do, why others act that's why we go to therapy, because we're waiting for somebody to give us the why. So I'm helping my clients and the people who read my book and the lectures I give on the why, by sometimes we don't know the why.
Of course,
So
I agree with that too.
Yeah. So if you put in the word jerk, they're just really a jerk, and I have no idea why. That helps you say, okay, I also have no control over that. I'm going to forgive them. I'm going to do boundaries or fences or poles or whatever the wording you want to use to stay away from that situation, to learn from that situation. And so that's pretty much what I mean by there's no such thing as a jerk pill. You can't why that one away.
So we've talked about a lot of different aspects of the forgiveness algorithm per se. But you haven't kind of just gone through a point by point. Can you just label the 5 or 6 points?
Sure. So we talked about writing the story.
Sure.
Okay. Then I have you look at expectations. What was your expectation of the situation or the person? Was it reasonable? And by the way, you all look pretty reasonable, so I'm sure it was reasonable. And then I'm going to ask you a very important question. Do the person or the situation, usually it's a person, did they have the will to meet your expectation? Okay. Did they have the skill? Do they know how? And this is super common in love relationships, family relationships. They sign up to do whatever it is, spouse, father, uncle, whatever. And then when they get into it, they ultimately don't have the skill. They didn't have good examples. They don't have the ability, alcohol issues, mental health issues, all those things. And then they lose their will. Okay, super important. They start out with the will, they really want to. And then they don't have the skill because of life. We all think we can. Just think of the wedding. The wedding, we had magical ideas of what was going to happen. And then real life snuck in and people don't have the wherewithal to deal with those things and still be kind. So they lose their skill. They don't have the skill, so they lose their will. So they leave. Very common in family situations when the parent leaves. How about when you started a job, right? You thought, I can do this. And then you're like 6 months later, I can't do this. And you're out, which is not a bad thing because that's really not going to probably harm people by that. But that is really harmful if it's in personal relationships, right? Whether it be a friend or whatever. So I have people look at expectations, big and important. And then we pick up unforgiveness over time, right? We really do. It's not usually the first time we're kind of, what was that? And then over time, we these expectations aren't fulfilled. We get angry. We have sadness, pain, and unfulfilled expectations. So we have to do things to put that down. Right? So I give you a whole bunch of tools to do that. Therapy, I talk about all kinds of therapy from life coaches to banging a drum to what a licensed clinical social worker is and why you would go to each one. And then all of those things. I also talk about prayer for people who have a spiritual connection or who might not have had one, but this might be your adventure into a little bit of a spiritual connection. And meditation, journaling, writing a letter, but let's be very clear, don't send it, right? Again, if we send a letter to someone outlining all their things, they're horrible, how do you think that's going to go? It sure in the heck isn't a Hallmark card. Right?
Yeah,
right. So they get very defensive. That's not what I'm like, write the letter, burn it, do, all those things. I give you lots of ceremony.
Well, that's a powerful way of letting go of something too.
Yeah. And I even give you an exercise called day in court. Lots of time we just want to be heard. We want that person to know, but for whatever reason, it's not a conversation that should happen. It isn't safe to happen. So I call it the day in court. It's like actually 2 chairs and you put a picture of the person or the name of the person or whatever. And this is very good exercise if you've been abused, a sexual abuse as a child, all that stuff. And you can actually look and say, that wasn't okay. That hurt me. That changed my life. You should have never done that. You can actually use words, like real words, and get that out because many times just the act of that tells our heart and brain that we've done it.
Yeah, very good.
Right. So I give you tools, lots of that. And then I talk about what forgiveness really is and what isn't, the misconceptions. I have you take a fun little quiz because, it's got to have some fun and find out where you hold your misconceptions about forgiveness, whether it came from religion or society or Disney and all those things. And then And then I have you look at that. And then I tell you what forgiveness really is, right? It is, as you've mentioned, it's a gift you give yourself because it's letting go of control of a person or a situation. It's also adjusting your expectations. So now you no longer expect what you once did.
Right.
And that's super powerful, super powerful. And then I talk about life on forgiveness, right? Because I use my forgiveness tools daily, literally daily. And I still have to stomp around sometimes, but I do. And my conversations are different because I'm able to say it like this without having an attachment to that expectation. It's changed a lot. If somebody cut you off in traffic, I'm like, let me see, my expectation was that you weren't going to cause an accident and that you were going to drive safely. Obviously, you can't do that. So I'm going to stay far away from you if I see you again. And I'm going to say, and then I kind of make little stories like we all do. Oh, they're on the way to the hospital, whatever.
Sure.
Whatever works to let my heart be less angry.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
So that's, in a nutshell, the algorithm, the step-by-step process to let it go.
Sounds pretty comprehensive to me.
And a little funny, I promise you will laugh.
And what would life be like without laughter? I mean, we have to laugh.
Yes, because sadness slams the heart shut. It really does. It's like a protective mode. When we laugh, it opens it up. And when it opens it up, it lets us work on stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
And forgiveness, in my experience, is a form of, the word I would use is emancipation, because while I am withholding my forgiveness, I am actually imprisoning myself in this painful place that keeps me from having a good life.
Yeah, exactly.
And the moment I learn to forgive, then I essentially release myself from that prison. I'm no longer holding on to a poison inside myself, expecting someone else to take it.
Absolutely.
You know,
absolutely.
It's a powerful, powerful release, a wonderful, wonderful tool. Not necessarily easy to do when you have grown so used to the other stuff.
Yep.
You know, where your ego mind
it's that breaking the habit, right?
Yeah.
And how hard is it to break a habit? Because last time I checked, I really like apple pie. And so I'm trying to break that habit. And it's hard because we're used to it. We're like, our bodies know how to do that, our minds and hearts. So when you have to break that, that's why I say I give you tools to set down the forgiveness. At a time and answer some questions in your head, and it releases some of that.
But you know, you said something else, and I just want to come back to it. You talked about the unforgiveness, this
anger,
resentment.
Pain and resentment. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I had that happen to me starting from the time I was 3 years old.
Oh yeah.
And I didn't know that it was happening. I just got more and more angry and resentful over a period of about 40 years. And even at that, I guess in my deep, deep subconscious, I was blaming my mother for something that she had done for me, but I had no idea what it was until well after that 40 years, and I started doing my growth work, and I got down underneath it. It took a long time for me, but that doesn't mean it has to take a long time for you or for anybody else. If you understand the tools, if you take advantage of this material, and you pick up a copy of this book here, right? The Forgiveness Solution on Amazon. I guarantee you're going to learn something that will help you to free yourself, to get yourself out of that prison so that you can just feel totally open and expansive and full of love. And that's what we're here to do, is to share and spread the forgiveness love, right?
And I also have some brand new classes, online classes, so you can do it in the privacy of your own home.
Great.
And I lead you through that book in a little over 30 some minutes. I would also suggest getting the book because there's some more meat in there. But How to Forgive Your Family, we all got one, and How to Forgive an Ex. And that's super important because it helps you have a next relationship in a much better place because you've forgiven, you've learned, you've forgiven yourself for making a bad decision. And so I have those classes right on mistytyme.com.
Misty Tyme. MISTYTYME.
And it truly is my name. Horses, Dogs, and Strippers, and Misty Tyme Reverend. So it's truly my name. My mom actually named me that, and no, she wasn't a hippie. So.
Well, it's hard to believe, but we've been having so much fun here that the time has just flown by, and here it is, almost 45 minutes or so.
Look at our age is showing up.
Yeah,
exactly.
So I just want to thank you, Misty, for joining me and sharing your your fun and your joyful wisdom and your tools about forgiveness. I think this is really important stuff, and I'm so glad that we've been able to share it with these folks here.
Yeah.
And I'm sure now that people are going to look at forgiveness with a whole new perspective, and hopefully they'll pick up your book and maybe sign up for some of your classes.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you all for watching today's program. Remember, you can catch all of the recordings on my website at lifemasterytv.com. That's life-mastery-tv.com. And also, remember to practice the Life Mastery Mantra. Now, you'll notice it has the word forgiveness in it. But it begins like this. I gratefully forgive the imperfect being I have been in the past. I gratefully accept the magnificent being I am right now. I gratefully welcome the evolved being I am becoming in each new moment. Until we meet again, I am David McLeod, your Life Mastery Coach, wishing you love, light, and blessings as you continue on your journey. See you next time.